Recent report from the Community Climate Collaborative, or C3, highlights how climate change is impacting the health of people in Charlottesville, especially in underserved communities. NBC 29's Jacob Phillips shows us how C3 is using what it found to create equitable solutions.
When we're building solutions to climate change, we have to take into account everyone's voices.
The report is broken down into 6 sections, each focusing on a certain aspect of health and how climate change affects them. Katie Ebinger, the Climate Justice Policy Manager for the Community Climate Collaborative, says this helps organizations like C3 create equitable solutions for underserved communities.
When you think of a topic like, we can talk about vehicle emissions, for instance. So vehicles can pollute not only carbon dioxide, but also other harmful gases like nitrogen oxides and things like that, which are really bad for your health.
Ebinger also says NOx emissions, which pollute the air significantly, are 2.7 times higher in Black and brown neighborhoods, where public transportation is more prevalent, and it takes the efforts of everyone in the community to beat climate change.
We have to build solutions that fit for everybody, and so I think that's the first point, is like just being as inclusive as possible.
In Charlottesville, Jacob Phillips, NBC 29 News.